son remained calm as the judge read the sentence, death by execution.
Josue Flores was murdered last Tuesday on his way home from school.
I had a nightmare the other night. It was so real. You just thought the world was there. I told him I was crazy.
Officers tell us Trujillo stabbed her boyfriend with stiletto heel shoes.
The officer has been shot. We need a life flight immediately. I have the suspect in custody.
Police say the suspect may be responsible for the murders of at least 6 women whose bodies have been found in or near the Acres Homes area.
Defense attorneys had argued that Yates was legally insane and grossly psychotic when she drowned the children. One by one, they described the deaths of the alleged other 8 victims of the convicted rail car killer.
Welcome to the Evidence Room, and thank you for joining us for our second episode, The Man Who Killed Halloween. I'm Robert Arnold.
And I'm Jason Wynn. I'm really excited to learn who killed Halloween because it affects everyone.
Just really quick, what's your opinion on O'Brien, Pixie Stick Killer? What do you think about him?
He was evil. He killed his own son. I mean, his daughter could have died too, but she didn't eat the pixie stick.
And in case you missed it, Rhonda was in our first episode, and you can see that on click2houston.com. But she was really the one that gave us the access for the evidence room, and we got to dig into some big files.
To use a pixie stick
On a child. An innocent child. Your own child. Sick.
We just got to hear from Rhonda in the evidence room.
Yes, and one of the things that was interesting when I called Rhonda and said, okay, this is going to be one of the cases that I wanted to profile because I've known it my whole life, she was surprised to say, there's not a lot here left on this guy.
I could just imagine that phone call and her talking about that case file being small.
She was surprised because typically cases that are notorious and have become what is referred to as high profile, typically the trial exhibits stick around for a very, very long time. So it was surprising that The Man Who Killed Halloween, there wasn't a lot left.
And let's get into our second case because it's a doozy of a one.
Yeah, Ronald Clark O'Brien.
I heard he changed Halloween.
Ronald Clark O'Brien. Now, his fellow death row inmates nicknamed him the Candyman.
We're not talking about the Candyman, are we, Robert?
Unfortunately, Houston has been unlucky enough to have 2 killers named the Candyman.
O'Brien gave his son and 4 other children poison Halloween candy back in 1974. Only 8-year-old Timmy O'Brien ate that candy and died.
Tell me a little bit more about the Candyman because I'm new to Houston and this has really affected a lot of people.
Well, first of all, when I was researching this case, the line that kept popping up in my head comes from one of my all-time favorite Stephen King novels, The Shining. Monsters are real, ghosts are real too. They live inside all of us and sometimes they win. And I think that really sums up who this guy is. Matter of fact, a KPRC2 report from nearly 40 years ago very succinctly spells out his legacy.
Ronald Clark O'Brien was notorious for 2 reasons. He killed his own son and he ruined the tradition of Halloween trick-or-treating.
That was a lot right there, but tell me how it affected you, your family, your kids, your wife.
Well, I think one of the things when my wife was pregnant with our first child, our son, one of the things that my mom told me was, prepare yourself. You're always going to worry. No matter how old they get, you're always going to worry about their well-being. They're always going to be your child. And I do believe that the vast majority of parents are like that. You remember when you went trick-or-treating, it was the same with me. Did your mom, you got to check the candy, we've got to go everything, you're not allowed to eat anything until we check it.
It might have been because of this case, to tell you the honest truth.
He's definitely one of the reasons that kids everywhere have to check their candy. And whether you realize it or not, you've heard about this guy in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my mom, she was a nurse. She was very clear on check your candy. Make sure it isn't open. Make sure it's not tampered with. And I think that that has a lot to do with these pixie sticks.
The fear and suspicion his crime unleashed lives every Halloween.
Let's go back to 1974. Halloween, it's raining. O'Brien, his wife, their 2 kids live in Deer Park, but they go to neighboring Pasadena to a friend's house.
This is the Pasadena neighborhood where Jimmy Bates and Ron O'Brien took their 4 children trick-or-treating back in Halloween of 1974. There were 4 children, Kimberly Bates and Elizabeth O'Brien, and the 2 boys, Timmy O'Brien and his best friend, Mark.
O'Brien, another father, O'Brien's 2 children, and that other father's 2 children all go out trick-or-treating in this neighborhood.
I, of course, won't ever forget it.
Jimmy Bates was betrayed by Ronald Clark O'Brien.
Bates said that before Halloween, O'Brien asked if he could bring his children over to trick-or-treat with the Bates children on Halloween night. Both families ate dinner together, and then the fathers took the children trick-or-treating.
At the time, it was a newer neighborhood. In fact, by today's geography, it's north of Red Bluff Road, right off of Beltway 8. Beltway wasn't even around
Really?
back in 1974.
Okay, so that really puts it in perspective.
After they're finished trick-or-treating,
All 4 children were given pixie sticks laced with cyanide. A 5th child was given a poison stick at the Bates house.
O'Brien takes his kids home. His daughter is tired. She's younger. He sends her to bed. Tim, O'Brien's little boy, really wanted the pixie stick. It was a big old pixie, so that's when his dad opened it. And you remember pixie sticks, the straws, they've got the different colored sugar.
And they're even bigger nowadays.
Right, exactly. So O'Brien's at home with his 2 children. Each one has a pixie stick, and the little boy wants to eat his pixie stick. So O'Brien helps him open it, helps him actually break it up and pours it into his mouth.
And Tim's his kid.
Yeah, Tim is O'Brien's son, 8-year-old son.
He was a very active child, almost hyper, and really a sweet kid.
Jimmy Bates remembers Timmy O'Brien. His own son Mark and Timmy were both 3rd graders at Carpenter Elementary School.
And so, according to the court documents and the prosecutors, almost instantly after Tim starts ingesting the sugar from the pixie stick, he starts convulsing, his stomach is killing him, and I mean, it's horrible. That really gets into how this story happened and how O'Brien got caught.
How long did it take police to start suspecting O'Brien?
Oh, only within a couple of days. I mean, but you've got to remember, at first, this was like a massive shock to the Houston area and nationally. This went national because everybody's hearing there's this little boy poisoned. Not only that, there were other poison pixie sticks out there. Remember,
really?
O'Brien gave one to each of his children, so that's 2. He gave one to the 2 friends, so that's 4. And then there was a 5th boy. A 5th boy actually came over later, and O'Brien gave him the 5th pixie stick. They couldn't account for that one at first. So now you get these news reports of child poison from Halloween candy, and then it's like, we think there may be more out there. Please check all your candy. So it was a full-on panic, and it went national.
Kind of put me in the frame of how O'Brien was during that time frame. Like, was he hysterical? Did he know? Like, what's...
But this was an interesting point. You know how sometimes something strikes you as odd at the moment, but you don't really know why until later? So at the hospital, O'Brien's like, he's beating his hands against the wall. Oh my God, please God, don't take my son. No, not my son, everything. The doctors actually got worried that he may have been poisoned too. And so they lay him down on the gurney and like, okay, we may need to pump your stomach. And almost instantly, it was like a light switch. He went, no, I'm good, thanks. And hops up off of the gurney. Nobody ever saw the kids actually get the pixie sticks. It was O'Brien who got the pixie sticks and gave one to each of the 4 kids. And this is where it gets weird. So naturally the police are like, oh my God, there's this poison pixie stick with cyanide. Where'd you get it from? O'Brien says, I'm pretty sure we got it from that house. Well, this is what's weird about it. O'Brien's little boy Tim and his buddy had knocked on that door. House was dark. No one answered.
Bates said O'Brien went to one house where no one appeared to be home, and after the children had scampered ahead to the next house, O'Brien came off the front porch carrying the pixie sticks. He gave the pixie sticks to the children and then later took them back and said he wanted to stop at his car for a moment. Bates said when O'Brien came back into the Bates house, he returned the pixie sticks to the children. Later that night, Timothy O'Brien died from eating a poisoned pixie stick.
Matter of fact, I had a chance to speak to one of the main prosecutors. There were 2 main prosecutors that were able to get a conviction and a death sentence against O'Brien.
There's no question about the fact that the right person was prosecuted.
But Vic Driscoll still lives in Houston. I had a chance to speak with him, and the way he explained it to me.
O'Brien walked up to the door, and he said, knocked on the door, and someone inside kind of opened, whom he didn't see, opened the door and stuck out his hand with a handful of pixie sticks.
I was one of those reporters who followed along the crowd of people through the streets in Pasadena as Ronald Clark O'Brien was pointing out where he thought his child got that pixie stick.
And he took those and back. Nobody,
So this no-faced person in a dark house that other people had knocked on suddenly opens the door for O'Brien and just hands a bunch of pixie sticks to him.
Right, right. And
that's a terrible story.
And it turns out that guy was worked at Hobby Airport and was at work, and had 100 eyewitnesses.
You think it kind of left a mark on us? Well, Vic Driscoll was here when all that was happening, and he remembers vividly what the city was like.
It raised the prospect of something unknown out there that you couldn't quite see and identify and defend against.
So it was a faceless, nameless child killer was on the prowl in Houston.
Right.
So the pixie sticks, one of the things that came out during the trial is pixie sticks are heat sealed. But yet the pixie sticks that had been given to each of the kids had been folded and stapled shut. And O'Brien had actually bragged to people about this brand new pocket stapler that he had got. And then when they search the house, they find scissors and a knife that had traces of the pixie stick sugar on the edges. So when I say, as a career criminal, this guy flunks out of kindergarten, it's these things. And then, of course, the ultimate thing was the insurance problem. Police found out that about 3-4 weeks before Tim was murdered, O'Brien had increased the amount of life insurance he had on his 2 children and decreased the amount of life insurance he had for himself and his wife. And this is
why would you do something like that?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because once this hit the news, what was happening, police started getting a lot of phone calls from people who started remembering conversations with O'Brien. And one of them was from the insurance agent. And Vic Driscoll explained that the insurance agent came in and said, yeah, when he did this, I told him, why would you do something like this? This is backwards. Something else the insurance agent told police that really, really made O'Brien a suspect.
They began hearing about his conversations about asking friends about the effects of cyanide. How much would it take and how often? And he, in the previous few weeks leading up to Halloween, he had talked to about 6 other non-related people about the effects of cyanide, and each one of them thought that was kind of odd at the time. When they inspected all the pixie sticks, they all had the same amount, and it was about 10 times more than it was necessary to kill anybody. He put too much cyanide and left it in the top and didn't mix it. That's why Tim died so quickly.
Was it his hope that all these kids would die and that would throw suspicion off of him?
Yes.
So he didn't have a problem killing 5 or 6 children?
No. And that was his cover. It was going to be random in the neighborhood.
What happened to the other kids?
I mean, it was just honestly by the grace of God that none of them ate their pixie sticks that night. It was just dumb luck, and police were able to gather it up.
Jimmy Bates was betrayed by Ronald Clark O'Brien. The 2 men and their families became friends at this Pasadena Baptist church.
And in fact, one of the children actually talked years later about why he didn't eat the pixie stick.
I wanted to eat it real bad because I was real proud of it. I thought it was the biggest piece of candy I had, and I thought, man, this is great. And I was fixing to open it up and eat it. My mother said, no, don't eat it tonight. Just wait till tomorrow. I just clean the house, the floor's clean. Just wait till tomorrow and eat it outside. And I said, okay, so I put it up.
Mark and his father are convinced Ron O'Brien deserves to die.
Susan, I don't see how anybody can ask or hope to receive more than they've given.
I realized that could have been me instead of him, or me too.
That sounds scary that he had to go through that.
Oh, it was absolutely terrifying, as it was for everybody else.
The whole time I'm listening to you here, I keep thinking to myself, where do you get cyanide at that time in that day and age?
Right, well, you could back then. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that Driscoll said came out in evidence is O'Brien actually went to 2 stores. One store he went to sold too much of it and it was too expensive. So he's talking with the guy saying, that's too much, that's too much. And the guy's like, well, okay, there's another shop down the road that you can buy a smaller quantity for cheaper. Back then you could.
Wow. Let's go back to the wife there, because he was married at this time, and I couldn't imagine being in her shoes during all of this.
Well, that was one of the things that the prosecutors had talked about.
And he told his insurance agent at that time, and don't tell my wife. If you talk to her or you happen to see her, don't tell her that we've done this. So he hid it. He did what was against advice and what nobody would do.
She had stuck by her husband, didn't really want to believe that he would be capable of something like that. However, when they found out about the life insurance, they brought them both down, separated them, and when they told her about the life insurance, that's when everything for her changed.
She had said, I had hoped that they would find the real person and I wouldn't have to be thinking that it was him. But I see now that that's not the case.
His own wife said he was an exaggerator, he was a narcissist to the end. He was the kind of guy, well, let me explain. This guy was a true definition of a loser. He had 21 jobs in 3 years, bounced his family to 5 different cities. At the time he murdered his son, they had almost no money in the bank account and their car was about to be repossessed. And then it came out that he had committed similar insurance frauds in the past, just smaller things, like they had fire insurance on their furniture and somehow their furniture caught fire. So this guy was just a loser to the end, but it's deeper than that. I mean, this is a man, like I said before, who had no problem killing his own children and 3 other kids in the neighborhood just for some insurance money.
Dayneen O'Brien has built a new life for herself here in Pasadena. After testifying against her husband, Ron, and helping to send him to prison, she divorced him.
So everybody could kind of go, I mean, who wants to live with that hanging over their heads for the rest of their life, that you were married to or your father was the man who killed Halloween?
No, I can imagine, because, my mom, again, made us look through the candy, take the candy to the police department. So now
to this day,
there's still a lot of law enforcement that warn about the candy and warn about what things are that may be coming out. So it kind of paints the picture on a lot of people's childhoods.
That's why I said at the beginning, you probably don't realize it, but you've heard of this story in some form or fashion. It's gotten changed over the years and all. You probably don't know the name Ronald Clark O'Brien, but this is, again, one of the reasons you have to check your candy and why there's that somewhat fear in the back of every parent's mind when their kids go out trick-or-treating.
My feelings are optimistic.
So I'm guessing at that point, that's right when O'Brien really cracked.
Oh, no. He never cracked. He never admitted his guilt. I
Really?
mean, you talk about, this dude is the ultimate narcissist. He never, ever, ever cracked.
Did he ever testify at his own trial?
Mm-hmm.
What did he say?
I didn't do it. I would never do it. How could I do that? I mean, the cornerstone of any child killer defense is what parent would kill their child, and the jury didn't buy it.
Because I have no guilt, and because I know inside that I didn't do it, and the people that are close to me and know me as an individual know I couldn't have done it, and I know that the Lord knows I didn't do it. So I've really got nothing to be scared about or afraid about.
And it was Ronald O'Brien himself, according to the jury, and I concur, that gave an 8-year-old boy the death penalty.
Kim Manganero says Ron O'Brien is ready for his execution, but still thinks he'll get a last-minute stay.
He's doing okay. I mean, they're treating him very well. He wanted me to let y'all know that.
Prison guards blocked off areas near the Walls unit to keep any protesting crowds away from the entrance. O'Brien ate a last meal of steak and potatoes and took a shower. He's given prison officials his will and asked that his corneas be given to an eye bank. If no judge or the governor stops the execution before midnight, O'Brien will be taken from his holding cell into the death chamber and given the lethal injection.
What was one of the big takeaways that you had?
All those things that I told you about his life and all the talk about cyanide, the stapler, and just how he did everything in the insurance money. I'll never forget Vic Driscoll, that prosecutor we've been hearing from, delivered the closing argument in the trial. And I remember it was really, really powerful. I was going to read part of it here. O'Brien did not have the truth in him, even when the truth would do him better. He has used his friends, his family, and his church. He sacrificed his only son, not on the altar of God as Abraham might have done, but on the altar of his own greed. And that pretty much sums up the guy perfectly.
Wow. What'd you feel like when you read that?
Sad. And for reasons thinking about no matter what's going on in that guy's life, no matter how many jobs he's lost, how many cities he's bounced around, whatever was in him that was so broken that allowed him to kill his own child. And again, other children had no problem doing that too. I can't fathom that. I can't understand how a person could ever get to that point.
Ronald Clark O'Brien's execution was cheered the moment spectators caught sight of eyewitnesses coming out of the death house. O'Brien never admitted killing his son, but in a last statement asked and offered forgiveness.
I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death, also to anyone I have offended in any way during my 39 years. I pray and ask your forgiveness, just as I forgive anyone who offended me in any way.
Robert, we've been spending a lot of time in the evidence room lately. We've got these murder cases all around us, but when it came to O'Brien's case, what was unique about it?
There wasn't much left.
Those holding candles outside executions usually want the killer kept alive. Last night, some who wanted Ronald O'Brien to die held candles.
For such a notorious murder, I was surprised that more of the court exhibits, trial exhibits, weren't still there. Really, it was a file, and it just had some pretty dry procedural court documents in it. A lot of the research that we did came from our own KPRC2 archives. We also went to the downtown public library, where they have all the old Houston Post, Houston Chronicle newspapers on microfilm. That helped as well. And then Driscoll actually gave us a book called Capital Murder, which dedicated a couple of chapters to these murders and the trial.
So what did you find interesting in that book?
A lot. There were pictures from the days of the trial. There was even a picture of one of the little boys who was given one of the poison pixie sticks being led in to the courtroom. That was it. You had a shot of the actual pixie sticks themselves, and there was a shot of the funeral at the church, and that was another weird thing that came up during the trial.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when Tim's funeral was happening, one of the parishioners remembered having a conversation with O'Brien, and O'Brien saying that he envied his son because his son was in a better place now and didn't have to face the trials of life like he did. And that parishioner actually came back and testified that who envies their dead child?
Robert, did anybody really come out and officially say they forgave him?
No. How do you forgive that? I mean, seriously, how do you forgive that?
After midnight, O'Brien was given the lethal drug dose. O'Brien's ex-wife is relieved he's dead. Daneen O'Brien says she doesn't hate him, she just feels nothing. Daneen sees the execution as the wiping of the slate, a chance to get on with life.
And that does it for our second episode of The Evidence Room. Remember, we're going to be streaming every Wednesday a new case. Next week, we've got Pickaxe Killer, Carla Faye Tucker.
And remember, you can see all of this on click2houston.com and KPRC2+. That's it for us.